Computer. Okay. Welcome everyone to Torah and Tea. I'm so happy to be back doing Torah and Tea, and welcome Sarah, because it's your first time here. You met everyone. Jessica, Vivian, Sharon, Rita, and on Zoom we have Andrea and Harriet and Nancy. Okay. So this series is going to be called The Truth of the Matter, and it's myths about Judaism debunked. Okay. Oh. And the first story we're going to go into is actually the story of Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, right? So very famous story that we might all be able to share what we know of, or in some version of it. So before we dive into the actual story, I want to ask you guys questions to see whether we have these myths, whether the myths are ones that we think of. So who knows what fruit Adam and Eve ate from the tree with? Like, what was the fruit that you like? If we talk about the sin, they were told not to eat.
It's an apple, right?
But someone said it's not the apple.
Yeah,
it's an apple.
There you go. Right. So everyone thinks it's an apple.
Okay. I figured it wasn't.
So everyone thinks it's an apple. And who wants to be like super brave and just say the story as if like someone was like, oh, tell me the story of Adam and Eve. How would you present the story? Does anyone want to share that? Don't worry. You're going to get it wrong, so it's fine. No matter who first. I'm kidding. The whole point of this is that we're going to go much deeper and understand it on a much higher level and deeper level. So you can't go wrong, because whatever you say is correct on the level that you have understood the story. Yeah, tell us, Rita.
God created Adam and Eve, and they went to the Garden of Eden, and they were told to not eat the fruit of any tree. And Eve took a bite of the apple, and then she was cursed, condemned, whatever, that she would have a lot of problems, pain in childbirth, and she wasn't supposed to do it, and she did it.
Does anyone have anything to add to that? Is that the way you all understand the story?
She then gave it to Adam,
Mm-hmm.
who then ate of it as well. And they were both cast out of Eden because of it. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Does that sound about right? So when we look back at the story of Adam and Eve, how do you look at them? What do you think of them? What do you think of the story? Like, why would the Torah, right here, everyone has the Torah written in a book. A Chumash is called. We call it a Chumash when it's in this form instead of like in the Torah scroll form. Right, you open. We are gonna look inside of it, but you open right up. It starts off with the account of creation, and then it goes into Adam and Eve and has this story. Like, what's the significance of it for us when you think about Adam and Eve? Is it like, oh wow, they first humans made big mistakes, did it all wrong? Like, how would you view that?
If you don't listen to God, there are consequences.
If you don't listen to God, there are consequences, right? So this is like where a lot of people get the master ruler in the sky, like, image of like, I'm going to punish you. I told you not to do that, and now you get punished, right?
Yeah,
it makes sense. You could read that story and get it from there. That's what it sounds like. Anyone else?
Well, I'm Harriet. This is Harriet, and I've been studying a lot about art, and I think that the depiction of of the apple, didn't get into culture, the general culture, until artists started depicting it with an apple, and that took a long time. And I think it was like the Middle Ages or something, or that showed up. But I always think that that there's a really funny sculpture, that there's Adam pointing to Eve, that he's saying, she made me do it, and then Eve is pointing to the snake and saying, the snake made me do it. And it's really a funny, it's a funny take on it. Nobody's taking responsibility. But I always felt that it was really bad that women got punished. And I think it's the negativity toward women that bothers me a lot. And there's just different ways of looking. There's a story on top, just blah, blah, blah. Then what's the deepest meaning? And the other one is, as soon as you tell someone not to do something, they're going to probably want to do it. And so it's a good thing to talk about. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hearing from you also is that you're saying the women got punished. So did the man. So did the snake. every, if we're going to go with that wording, got punished, it did apply to, there was different things for each person. So not just the woman, but yeah, like, what is this? Like, God's like, don't eat from this. And then they're all, no one's taking responsibility. And then there's punishment, right? Sounds kind of like not such a great story. Not so like, what's our lesson? Or is our lesson like, God's going to punish us if we do something bad? Is that what we want our takeaway to be from this? Like, what's really going on here? It's interesting that you brought up, Harriet, about the apple being the depiction, as only coming out later as like in the, we're going to talk about that. What's the deal with the fruit? Okay, so let's dive in. Let's really understand this story, because we know that the word Torah comes from the Hebrew word hora'ah, which means lesson. So every single thing in the Torah is there to teach us a lesson. It's not a storybook. It's not a history book. It's not there to just tell us random details of things. Every single letter, word, piece of information that's in Torah is a lesson for us how we live our lives in every generation, including today. So what is this, the story of Adam and Chava? I even want to add that the English people say, right, we say Adam and Eve. That's how it's translated in English. I'm not sure where that started, probably also medieval, because Eve comes from evil. That's why they call her Eve. But in Hebrew, that's not her name. Her name in the Torah is Chava, which is Aim Kol Chai, the mother of all life. Like, she is the mother of all humanity that would ever come forth. Adam, her own husband, like, called her that, Chava, the mother of all life. There's no Eve or evil associated with her name. That, again, is something that came out later. So in line with the idea here, Harriet, that anything from this story that's like, oh, evil against women or whatever came out. I don't know enough of the history, but yeah, like in medieval times or some point where there was, maybe someone knows the history of it more, but definitely not from Torah. Okay, so let's read in the Chumash a little bit of the story. Okay, so if you turn to, let me find the page for you. Turn to page, I want to go to 216. Okay, go to page 15. Okay. Now, you go to page 15 in the English. Okay, now what I want you to know here is this is a really, bless you, a really fascinating Chumash to learn from, and I really like it in that way, because like I always say, if you just take the 5 books of Moses, which is the written Torah, there's the written Torah and the oral Torah. And if you take the 5 books of Moses, which is the written Torah, and you just read it word for word, let's translate Hebrew to English and read the English translation, it's very cryptic. And a lot of things don't make sense or are not understood. And you don't get the deeper picture of anything at all. Now, what's interesting about what this Chumash does is it still gives you the direct translation. So if you see the bolded words in the English are direct translations of the Hebrew words. And then the words in between are like, so that it can read like a full story based on oral Torah that supplements the written Torah. Okay, so like, for example, if you go to verse 16, which is all the way at the bottom of page 15, right? God commanded the human, talking about Adam, saying, of every tree of the garden, including the tree of life, you may eat freely, right? So in the Hebrew, it's of every tree of the garden, you may eat freely, but in there, it's like, that includes the tree of life. Like, they were allowed to eat from the tree of life. They were not allowed to eat, right? And then the next verse, but you must not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for on the day you eat of it, you will die. Right? So that's direct translation. Okay. So I'm going to just.
The bold is the direct translation.
Exactly. The bold is direct translation. And in between, right, is like the oral Torah supplementing it so that it can read more fully like a story, so to speak. Okay. So okay, so that I'm going to just read what?
But they didn't die.
Yeah, you're right. They didn't die. Well, although mortality became, they would have like lived on forever. Yeah. Because the tree of life makes you live on forever, and they were allowed to eat from the tree of life. Yes. The
question is also, if they are newly made, would they understand what dying means?
Good question.
Right, like the
They have never seen anything die, so
right.
Why would they know that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna read through the story just basically so that we have like the basic story, and then we're going to ask some questions and fill it in with some of the myths that we all clearly still have, right? Okay, so, and I'm not going to do all of it, right? There's the Garden of Eden and God creating Adam, which we had already, and the creation of the world and all of that. But I'm at the bottom of page 15. So I'm reading chapter 2, verses 16 and 17, which I just read, right? God commanded the human, saying, of every tree of the garden you can eat freely, but you must not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for on the day you eat of it, you will die. Okay, then God goes on to say that it's not good for you to be alone, and he makes a wife for Adam. And obviously we can go into how that's created and all that. And then Adam goes on to name the animals. He goes on to name the animals, and then at the bottom of page 17, that's where the creation of Chava, even though again it's translated as Eve, but that actually comes from that's why, like in Hebrew, when we don't, when we only look at the English, we can miss so much of the Hebrew, because in the Hebrew, it's like not always like can you even find the right English word to actually express what that Hebrew word is saying or whatever it is. But
So how do they get from Chava to Eve?
I think that came about in the medieval times. At some point when there was like a lot of, someone help, I don't want to like say really hard history things, but like really painting women in a very negative light, like that they are the source of sin and the source of all evil, and she is the one who blah blah blah, and so
do you think he got here?
like some whole thing, but like that doesn't exist in the Hebrew. It doesn't exist in the concept. It doesn't exist at all, which is actually funny to me, because most of these books that we use, they would translate it properly, but I guess Eve became such a common translation as her secular name, so to speak, as her name, that even in this Chumash translation it says Eve. Like it's not gonna not say it, because Adam and Eve, like Abraham and Sarah, it's just became, I don't know. But there's nowhere is that in the Hebrew. Okay, so I'm going to just read. Okay. I'm going to go to, because I just want to get to the actual story. So I'm on page 19, verse 25. Okay. So the two of them were naked, the man and his wife, but they felt no shame in this. Okay. Now I'm going to I'm just reading the bowl so that we get the direct story. Now the serpent was the most cunning of all the wild beasts that God had made. The snake originally was able to talk and had feet, right? So he said to the woman, did God really say you may not eat from any of the trees of the garden? The woman replied to the serpent, we may eat from the fruit of the trees of the garden. But as to the fruit of the tree of knowledge, which is in the middle of the garden, God said, you must not eat of it, nor may you touch it, lest you die. Okay. And obviously God did not say that you can't touch it, just that you can't eat from it. So that's interesting right there, right? The serpent said to the woman, so he pushed her into the tree and nothing happened. So he said, just as you didn't die from touching it, you certainly will not die from eating its fruit. And that, Chava saw that, right? So rather, the serpent continued, he said, God did not forbid you to eat the fruit for your own good. Like then the serpent's basically convincing her and saying it's, God didn't give this commandment for your good. It was for God's sake. And God knows that on the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened. Like, I'm going to explain this more, but anyways, that you're going to be more like God and he doesn't want you to. And so that's why. And then we have on page 21, this quote unquote, the primordial sin, right? So where the snake convinces Chava and she eats from the tree. And okay, so I'm just going to try to get back to just the bowl. The woman saw that the tree was good for eating and desirable to the eyes, and that the tree was attractive as a means to gain intelligence. And she took some of its fruit and she ate it. And she also gave some to her husband with her, and he ate it. Okay, now I'm on verse number 7. Then the eyes of both of them were figuratively opened. They suddenly understood that they had lost their original divine consciousness. They were no longer aware of themselves as part of God. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting into more of the explanation. Okay, they thus realized that they were figuratively naked, and they sewed together leaves that they plucked from a fig tree and made themselves loincloths. So here it tells us where the leaves that they covered themselves came from, right? It says it was from a fig tree, but it doesn't tell us what fruit they ate. If you saw it, right? I read through that. So, and everyone says, oh, the apple, but there is no mention in the story at all of an apple. Okay. And then they heard the voice of God moving about in the garden in the direction of the day's end, and the man and wife hid themselves from God among the trees of the garden. And God called to the man and said to him, where are you? He replied, I heard your voice in the garden and I was afraid because I am naked, so I hid. And then God responds, who told you that you're naked? Did you eat of the tree from which I commanded you not to eat? And the man replied, the woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree and I ate, right? Talking about the shifting
Careful.
blame thing. And God said to the woman, what is this that you have done? And she says, the serpent deceived me and I ate. Okay. And then it goes into the consequences. What happened there? So God says to the serpent, because you did this, you are now cursed. You're going to lose your ability to speak. You're going to lose your feet, you know, and in general, you're going to lose your voice. You're going to now hiss, and different things that will happen to animals. You're going to move on your belly. You're going to eat dust all the days of your life. And then you're going to be a disliked animal. And to the, okay, so that was to the snake. To the woman, he said, and just by the way, again, this is deeper if you saw in between, but that the snake, again, was like a talking on feet animal, but he wanted to marry Chava. So he wanted to get Adam, this is again already going beneath the surface, but deeper than what you see from the, he wanted to get Adam to eat from the tree so that Adam will die. And then he can marry Chava, right? Because he just, but meanwhile, Chava ate first and then gave to Adam. But anyways, that was where that started. So anyway, so and then God said to the woman, he said, I will greatly increase your difficulty in raising children and in your pregnancy from now on. And you're going to give birth to children in anguish. Your longing will be for your husband, but he will dominate you. So that was to women. And then to Adam, he said, because you listened to your wife and you ate of the tree about which I commanded you, saying, don't eat from it. The earth will be cursed because of you. You will produce food from it with difficulty all the days of your life. You're going to have to work hard to earn a living. You're going to have to work hard to eat your food. You're going to eat bread by the sweat of your brow until you return to the ground, for you were taken from it, for you are dust, you will return to dust. Okay. And then it goes on, God made them clothing and he banished them from the garden. Okay. So maybe that gives us a drop deeper than something we might have understood, but still it's pretty much in line with maybe what the myths that some of us think, right? It just still has that very like master in the sky, God said something, they didn't listen, you're punished kind of vibe. We do see, I think, very clearly now that we did not come across the word apple anywhere. So that we can maybe that myth we can, so to speak, debunk, right?
So where did it come from?
Okay, so now, yeah, so let's talk about the fruit, and then we're going to talk about also a little bit of a deeper meaning of the story. So you have in front of you a handout of some of the sources. So we actually just read the forbidden, text 1, right, which is chapter 2, verse 15 to 17, and I'm going to just read it again in Hebrew. God took the human and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to preserve it, which is also almost like a what's the word? Kind of like a mission statement a little bit, right? For God to humankind, saying, I'm putting you into the garden, but why? La'avda u'lashamra, to work it and to preserve it, to improve upon my creation, to improve upon the world I've created, right? To be doers in this world, and then, you know, to do good. And obviously along the line later about the Torah and the mitzvot having 365 negative commandments to keep and 248 positive commandments to keep. So it's like, these are work it and to preserve it, doing the positive, doing the things we should do and the things we should not do, right? Guarding something and preserving something. Vayitzav Hashem Elokim al ha'adam lemor mikol eitz hagan achol tochel u'me'etz hadas tov hara lo tochel mimenu. So God commanded the human, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, right? So that's what that was the command. So what does the Talmud tell us on this? That's text number 2, the Talmud, which is the oral Torah written down, the Talmud. They discuss what was this fruit, right? It says the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shouldn't eat. What kind of tree was it? So, does someone else want to read for us the bottom text number 2 in the English? You want to read for that, Rita?
What kind of tree was the tree from which the first human ate? Rabbi Meir stated that it was a grapevine, because no substance brings calamity upon humans like wine. For it is stated further, Genesis 3:21, Noah consumed wine and became drunk, leading to the undesirable consequences described there. Rabbi Nehemiah stated it was a fig tree, for it was with the very item with which they sinned that they subsequently rectified the consequences of their sin, their nakedness. As it stated, Genesis 3:7, they sewed together fig leaves as clothing to cover their nakedness.
Okay, so we have two opinions here, actually, right? So as we see in the written Torah, in the words of the Torah, there is no mention of a fruit. And the reason that's given is because that way we don't associate any negativity with any specific fruit. Like it shouldn't be like, oh, apples are bad, we don't eat apples or anything like that. We shouldn't associate negativity with any fruit. But it doesn't mean that we don't have some, suggestions or some oral Torah that can help us understand what might this fruit have been. We have a couple, none of them are the apple though. Okay. Although I do want to say that the Garden of Eden was primarily made up of apple trees. So maybe that's also another place, like meaning there was a lot of apple trees in the Garden of Eden. The tree of knowledge was not an apple tree and things like that, but there were a lot of apple trees there. So maybe it also came from there. Okay. So we have some opinions. Rabbi Meir says it was a grapevine. Why? Because he saw in other places, we see what could happen when someone has too much wine. He's like inferring from like, well, here by Noah after the flood, Noah built planted a vine, a vineyard, and drank and got drunk, and then his own sons abused him. So his own son abused him. So Noah consumed wine, became drunk, and it led to undesirable consequences described there. Rabbi Nehemiah said, so that's one opinion, right? We see that people can get drunk and then negative things could happen. So this was probably a grapevine because a negative thing happened from them eating from it. Rabbi Nehemiah says it was a fig tree. How does he get this idea? Because as soon as they ate from the tree of knowledge, they now were very self-aware of their own nakedness. We're going to talk about that. It's almost like we're going to divide the world of existence into pre-eating from the tree of knowledge and post-eating from the tree of knowledge. What was the world like before and what was it like after? But after, they were aware of their own nakedness, and before they weren't, right? So now they're like, wait, we need to cover ourselves. But no tree wanted to give of its self to them because they're like, no, you just did something wrong and you just ate from the tree that you weren't supposed to. Like, we don't want to have any part in this. So, but the fact that they got leaves from the fig tree, because it's almost like that was to show like that was the tree that they ate from that they weren't supposed to. They ate a fig and they weren't supposed to. And now they're going to use it for something positive. They did something they weren't supposed to with that tree. Now they're going to use the leaves to cover up their own nakedness. Okay. So they sewed together fig leaves as clothing to cover their nakedness. That's what Rabbi Nehemiah tells us. So it's actually very interesting. You can learn a very important, powerful message here about things that could be negative circumstances to use that exact same thing towards a positive circumstance, right? The same way that they like, I don't like the word sinned, but I'll just use it because that's just how it works here. But yeah, in this story, it just seems like they sinned, but they ate from the fig that they weren't supposed to. So then they used part of the tree, right? And to like rectify now what's going on and what has to happen now. And now one of the things is modesty. Actually, we're going to talk about intimacy and modesty, but that's kind of what came out of this. And now they're using that for a positive purpose. So for all of us in our own lives, what's the message here, right? From the same place that negativity could come some positivity, right? I mean, we have a lot of cliches in that area, right? What if you don't, like challenges make you stronger, right? Or like we grow from the dark places, like those kinds of things. But if we just took away the clichéness of it, it's very true, right? That I'm sure everyone here can think of something where it seemed like a challenge or it seemed like a dark place or it seemed like a difficulty. And then something really beautiful came out of it. An example I give, I mean, there's so many in different ways, but like that story, the one where, I told you we got like 60-day notice when we were in our second rental house and we had to move and I was in my like 8th month of pregnancy and we just thought like, this is so crazy. And then we end up buying a house, right? But like, did we see that ending at that beginning? No, it just looked like this really tough situation to be in that had a really beautiful, positive ending. And, it's things where people have situations where they went to the doctor just for a regular checkup or for one little thing. And then they were able to discover something much more that was going on. And because they went to the doctor for that, they were now able to like take care of that bigger problem that they wouldn't have otherwise known about. Like, right. I mean, these are, everyone has in their own life. How could, and even if it's not where you already see the ending, but just to know that that's almost like the the way God set up the world is that like we grow from our challenges. Things that are hard actually make us stronger, right? Any comments on that? Okay. And so that is something we learned just from this idea here that Adam and Eve, they ate from the fig tree, and then they used the fig tree itself to kind of like rectify that mistake. Okay. And then, and then text number 3 right there. Okay, so first of all, myth number 1 was busted, right? We all agree now that there was just no apple. Those are just, that's incorrect. Does anyone want to share, by the way, any examples where something negative happened that then you were able to either redefine it as positive or see the positive? Does anyone have a personal example to share?
Well, it's kind of run of the mill, but I've had jobs ended for me, like like either I was fired or laid off, and it's always been the case that the job that I found next was better.
Yeah, it's amazing. Amazing that you were able to like see that. And then in the moment, we don't always think that right away, right? We're like, oh, this is awful. But like, imagine we were able to access that in the moment. Like, I know something better is coming. Like, I just know it, right? That kind of.
The end of something is the beginning of something else. The end of something can be the beginning of something else.
Yeah.
So it could be being a new beginning.
Yeah.
Positive beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then if you see here in text number 3, so we have these two opinions, right? About it was a grapevine, it was a fig. And then we also have this other opinion where a rabbi says we actually should not identify the fruit. And that's in text number 3. You'll see that Midrash Parashas Rabbah. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi stated, heaven forbid that we identify the fruit. God never revealed the identity of that tree to any person, and he never will. If God is careful to safeguard the dignity of Adam's descendants, he's certainly careful to protect the dignity of Adam himself. Like, let's not, like, meaning every piece of Torah is revealed to us, whatever we do know. Like, think about how much is in Torah as a story, even though it's not a storybook, but there's so many more details we don't know, right? Like, even reading the story, I'm like, wait, but what about this? And what about this? And did they say this to each other in between? And what did they think? And whereas, like, you want to know, but that's not really what it's about. It's actually about all really instruction and lessons for our life. So here he's saying, we don't know, and we don't need to know. It's so irrelevant to the story.
Right.
Although we could get this lesson that we got, right, from the idea of the fig and the fig leaf. And if God didn't disclose it in the story, it's because it's like he's preserving Adam's dignity, he's preserving the fruit's dignity, the descendants. Like we don't have to know. We don't have to like decide that one fruit is negative.
I was so concerned with preserving Adam's dignity when he was so mad at them.
Okay,
that doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now I actually really want to go into like the deeper story here, because I'm going to take this whole story and I'm going to turn it on its head for you. Okay. But I'm just going to review the 3 points on your handout, just these 3 points just specifically about the fruit. So contemporary cultural references to the tree of knowledge depict it as an apple tree, but there are no Jewish sources to justify this designation. One Talmudic view identifies the fruit as a fig, in which case the object of sin subsequently becomes a source of healing, right? Their garments. So this reminds us that even things that cause us pain, stress, or sorrow can become sources of comfort, joy, and healing. Another Talmudic view insists that the fruit's identity was deliberately undisclosed, and this teaches us that even individuals with major moral failings deserve fair treatment and dignity. So that idea, meaning even if they did something wrong, and even if this was so wrong, like, people deserve dignity, right? It doesn't mean that we need to like completely write them off, take away their dignity, right? That's something interesting. There's actually a fascinating story about a bunch of prisoners who came to visit the Rebbe. I'll make sure I get this right. So there's an institute called the Aleph Institute, if any of you are familiar with it or heard about it, and it's actually like Chabad's prison branch, right? To like go into different prisons and find the Jewish prisoners and, make sure that they have matzah for Passover, or if they need a sitter, or if they're, whatever they need in prison, having their prison needs met. sometimes helping them, I don't know, I mean, a lot more, I think, navigate the court system or help them with their sentence, whatever it is. Okay. So there was a weekend, Shavuos 1985, after the holiday of Shavuot, that the Aleph Institute organized a 2-week Torah study retreat in Crown Heights, which is the Chabad headquarters. I mean, it's a city in Brooklyn, but like an area in Brooklyn, but that's where like the Chabad 770 and headquarters are and all of that. And there was like inmates that they were able to have like a temporary release for good behavior, and they were able to like go on this the study thing. And there were 20 men that came. And so the Rebbe would, in 770, that's the address, 770 Eastern Parkway, which is the Rebbe's big shul, big synagogue, still there now. On Shabbat, the Rebbe would farbring, which is like the Rebbe would like give over talks, and everyone would like pack the place and listen to the Rebbe's talks, and big public gathering. And it was usually take place Saturday afternoon at 1:30. And so a few minutes before this gathering, Rabbi Label Groner, who's the Rebbe's secretary, he had multiple different rabbis as a secretary, but that's one of them. He came looking for the director of the Aleph Institute, who is Rabbi Shalom Ber Lipsker. And he said, the Rebbe said that all these prisoners shouldn't be seated together in the crowd. They should be dispersed amongst the crowd. And Rabbi Lipsker was very surprised, right? He had reserved seating. He had like a place for his group to be in one area. And this would require some last minute changing. How are we going to disperse them amongst the crowd? And Rabbi Groner explained the Rebbe's reason. And he said, if they're seated together, people are going to ask, who are they? Like, who is this group? And then it's going to be said, oh, they're prisoners. They're going to all be just grouped together as if like that's their identity, and it will be embarrassing to them. So they should be seated separately. And the Rebbe also explained that that at the end of the farbrengen, the Rebbe would usually give out like either like little bottles or little of liquor, right, as to like make a l'chaim, right? So like a little mashka, right, some liquor, and everyone would like make a l'chaim with each other. And he said he's not going to give a bottle, even though they're deserving of it. And it was like an honor, right, to get some of the Rebbe's, Kiddush cup or some of his l'chaim or whatever it was. But he didn't want to attract, they weren't allowed to have it, right? Like, meaning he's like, it's not because they're not deserving. Inmates aren't allowed to have alcohol. And he didn't want to attract any attention to them and therefore create any shame. Okay, so this is like an example where we see like every single person is deserving of dignity, right? Even people with moral feelings, even people who make mistakes, even people like, there are ways that we can still work to preserve someone's dignity. And in this story, we see how the Rebbe did that. So here again, right? Does that kind of answer your question, Jessica?
Yeah. But I still have a question about how not revealing the type of fruit. Like,
does that help Adam's dignity?
Or
No, yeah, I did read that. That it was like so that we wouldn't associate, the sin of the tree of knowledge with this fruit. So it shouldn't be that like,
Okay.
I did read that. Okay. So that's the myth buster on the fruit. But I want to take the whole story and go a little bit deeper, because I think that that's extremely powerful to understand really what's going on deeper here. Okay. So I want us to look at it as there is pre-tree of knowledge, there's world pre-tree of knowledge, and there's world post-tree of knowledge. Okay. The world pre-tree of knowledge was perfection. It was perfection. It was Adam and Eve. They didn't even have clothing because there was no self-awareness. There was only God consciousness. So nakedness, even intimacy, sexuality, it could not be abused. There was no such thing as abuse of those things because everything was God consciousness. The act of them eating food was just for the sake of godliness. That their sexual intimacy was just for the sake of godliness.
Yeah, they didn't need to eat food, right?
No, they did need to eat. They were human beings.
Okay.
But the act of eating was just like there was no. It was like almost like a world of perfection. There was only God consciousness pre-tree of knowledge, right? So, if you read this story on a surface level, it looks like Chava made a mistake. She defaulted, she ate from the tree. But if we go deeper, there was something much, much more profound at play, okay? Chava perceived with women's intuition that only women have, that eating from the tree was the key to unlocking the entire purpose of humanity, the entire mission in the universe, okay? So the Zohar tells us this is one of the like fundamental things of, Jewish mysticism, Hasidic philosophy, all of it is that there's a quote in the Zohar, the first book of Jewish mysticism, that God, like, why did God create the world? Why did God even create a world? He could have just been himself. Everything's fine. Why are you creating a world, right? the phrase that we have to understand it is Nisaiva HaKadosh Baruch Hu lios lo dira zu yisparach b'tachtonim. God desired to have a dwelling place in the lowest world. God desired that. Now, what does that mean, right? So even the question on that, what do you mean God desired? Like you can't ask questions on a taiva. Taiva is the Hebrew word, on a craving, right? A pregnant woman who's craving pickles and ice cream, or I craved hot peppers, like weird things. Why? I have no idea. I cannot tell you why I craved it. I cannot tell you why my husband and I had to walk around Crown Heights when we lived there for 20 minutes on a Friday night after our Friday night Shabbat dinner, knocking on people's doors, asking them if they have hot peppers because I wanted a hot pepper. Don't worry, it was like people we knew, but still, funny memory, right? Because it made no sense. You can't really ask questions on someone's like deepest desire. Why? You're going to just get to because God. So we don't have an answer to why God wanted this. God wanted a very, very low world and a connection to the people in that quote unquote low world for them to choose. I choose God. I choose connecting with God. Now, in order for God to do that, I mean, obviously God could do anything, but God created a world, but the world was still perfection. Why? Because God wanted the people to choose that. Not, I'm going to create a world that's imperfect, and now you connect, like I'm commanding you what you should now do. It's, I want you to choose that you want to connect with me, that you want to create this world. Chava intuited that eating from this tree, the tree of good and evil, right? It was a tree of good and evil. Because before that, again, pre-eating from the tree, the world was objective. Like good and bad was objective to them. It was like there's right and there's wrong, right? There's moral and there's immoral. It was just very objective. They can make those decisions from an emotional distance because all they had was God consciousness. Whereas good and evil, think about good and bad. How's good and bad now? Good and bad is very subjective. Good is like it resonates with me and it feels good to me, so I label it as good. And someone labels something as bad because it's the opposite. It doesn't resonate with them. They think it's bad. But like we might all have different ideas of good and evil, of what's good and what's not good, right? Because we're subjective, as opposed to God consciousness, which has a very objective reality of that. So by Chava willingly choosing to eat from the tree, she was willingly choosing a world of everything that came into play, how the world changed afterwards. She's basically saying, I'm choosing the world that I know God actually desires. And I'm going to give some to Adam. We're going to do it together. This is our life's mission, man and woman. This is our life's mission, to not be only divine consciousness, to have a mixture of good and evil, to have selfishness, indulgence, right? Like now there was an ability for selfishness, for indulgence, for food to be used and abused, right? For eating disorders, for something like the holiest act of holy intimacy. That's this book right here, Holy Intimacy. And it starts off talking about the story of Adam and Chava, right? Because now the holiest thing also has the ability to be the most degrading thing, to be used and abused, to be misconstrued, to be misused, right? Like all the awful things that can happen in the world, rape and molestation, right? So in other words, the highest things now can fall to the lowest of places because they ate from that tree.
So are you saying that God wanted Papa to do that?
Yeah, you want me to prove it to you?
Sure.
Okay. Now look at this verse. It makes no sense. Okay, turn back to chapter 2. To go back to page 15, right? That's where it was. Okay, page 15 at the bottom. God commanded the human saying, and I'm telling you the words directly, right? God commanded the human saying, of every tree of the garden you may eat freely. Look at verse 17. But you must not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For on the day you eat of it, you will die. God just said, you're going to eat it and you're going to die. If you're telling someone not to do something, you don't tell them, and when you do it, here's what's going to happen. You say, don't do it, right? Like, I don't tell my kids, like, I don't know,
Right, you're not gonna
don't
say
hit your sibling,
Because you're gonna die.
because when you hit your sibling, here's what's going to happen.
Mm.
I'm expecting them not to do the thing.
Well, why wouldn't you say that? Because you're gonna say, if you hit your sibling, I'm gonna ground you, or like, I'm gonna punish you.
No, it's not even if you hit your sibling. It's when you hit your sibling, here's what's going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like that. If I say,
Okay.
don't hit your sibling, when you hit your sibling, here's what's happening. That's what God said.
Oh,
Don't eat. When you eat from it, here's what's going to happen. God is telling them, I know what you're going to do.
Okay.
Because really, that is what God's intention was, but he wanted it to come from them. And Chava realized that. Chava's Bina Yisera, her woman intuition, realized the truth of the matter here is God wants a different kind of world, and we're going to willingly choose it. A world where, yes, there's going to be some pain and suffering and evil and childbirth and difficulty and challenge and working hard for your food and having to earn it and having to earn a living and working the land and all, but it's much more than that. It's that now there's the there's the self-awareness and the divine awareness. There's the ability to use something for so much holiness and the ability to abuse something, right? For things can like transcend. We have the ability to transcend and soar and ascend, which also means we have the potential to stumble and fall. None of that existed pre-tree of knowledge eating.
I have a question. This is
Yes.
Harriet. Because my book is only in English.
Yeah.
And it says, but as for the tree of knowledge of good and bad, you must not eat of it, for as soon as you eat of it, you shall die. In Hebrew, it doesn't say if you, obviously, if you eat it, you will die. It says for as soon as you. So in Hebrew, as
You want me to translate it from the Hebrew, you're saying?
yes,
Ki biyom achocha mimenu mos tamus, because on the day you eat from it, you will die. Literally, God is telling them, you're going to eat from it. He's like, don't eat from it. On the day you eat from it, here's what's going to happen.
so it could have been written, if you eat of it, then you will die. But it says when, basically, as soon as you do. Okay.
Yeah,
That is
exactly.
good. Thank you. That's amazing.
Yeah, so he's anticipating that you're gonna just do.
God anticipated this. So do you think God's like this vengeful, like, how dare you? How could you? It was like, it's almost like this big setup.
And did he provide the serpent as a temptation?
Yes, yes. And that snake is kind of like now what we would call like the Yetzer Hara, that evil inclination, meaning that now it's like that voice inside of us that's going to say, do this thing, and it's not so bad, it's no big deal, right? Like the fact that we can have, you know, whatever, it's like, you know, in the cartoons they depict the good voice and the bad voice on your shoulder. But like literally we have two souls inside of us, right? I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but the idea that we have God consciousness and self-consciousness, and they're gonna vie for attention and want different things and have conflicting voices in our head. Yeah,
But
you're gonna
if
say that.
God wanted them to, you know, eat the whatever,
Yeah.
and he wanted all those things, then why did he punish the serpent so terribly? And why did he tell Eve that, you know, her husband was gonna beat her, or like, you know, like why?
Yeah, just not beat her. I just want to correct that.
Dominate.
Dominate, which means what, you know, we say we live in a world today where the like male dominance or whatever, it's like part of that. Like when Mashiach comes, it's going to be the opposite. Female energy is going to be more dominant. But that was like one of the effects of their eating from the tree, is that there's like this male dominant energy in the world. Now, that's not the same as men are better. That's not true, you know, or women are second-class citizens or any of that. That's not to say, but do we live in a more male energy dominated world? Right. That's why there's a lot of, you know, the feminist movement and equal pay and all those things should happen, but because it could be abused, right? But as opposed to like, okay, that's just like a whole nother topic. Yeah, because the male dominant energy could be abused, exactly, because we live in a world now where anything could be abused.
And before they ate from the fruit, doesn't it say that it's not good for man to be alone? He needs an equal.
Yeah. Yes.
And before they ate, they were technically
Yes.
equal.
Yes.
And then
Exactly.
after they ate, he
Right.
had to become dominant over her.
Right. And it's not just right. And that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be equal now. It just means that is like almost like, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
So they were actually back to back, and God separated them. We could read about how, right. And God separated them and said, you need a helper, you need a partner. And then he had that man and woman and white, right? But then after the tree, the energies shifted, right? Where now we live in a masculine dominated energy world versus feminine. And when Mashiach comes, it's gonna switch again. So what's interesting also, so say again.
There won't be, the world
It won't be
screwed up.
Yeah. So in some ways we could be like, oh, look at this screwed up world we live in. But in other ways, it's like, actually, it's the world exactly how God intended not to stay this way, for us to now unscrew it. Yes. For us to now be the ones who work on it and preserve it and guard it and elevate it and create godliness in it and to create divine consciousness in it. For us to do the work our own selves to get it back to, so to speak, not even pre-tree of knowledge state, even better than that, even higher than that, right? So obviously there was something much more profound here going on with this story. That's why it's the first story of humanity, because it's the story of our mission, right? Don't you start something off with your mission statement, right? That's how it works. Someone like, I don't know, gets a new leadership position and they say, here's what we're doing, right? So it's like God created Adam and Eve, and the story happened because here is humanity's mission, to create a God consciousness world, to choose good over evil, to choose right over wrong, to have the mixture and the confusion and the ability for both and make the right choices. It ushered in free will. There wasn't actually free will before. That's a meaningful service of God, right? When we are choosing it, not when it's just automatic. Adam and Chava was automatic before. So she ate from it and she invited Adam, come along with me into this world. We're partners in it. We're supposed to do this together. Man and woman, come with me. Okay. Now it's also very interesting. This is, just about this whole intimacy book that I just started. But the story itself is actually like framed by discussion about intimacy or sexuality, their nakedness, right? It says they were both naked, the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed, right? And that's what it says about it. And then immediately after they ate from the tree, the Torah says the eyes of both of them were opened and they realized that they were naked. They sewed together fig leaves and they made aprons for themselves. They heard God's voice moving in the garden and they hid, right? And God said, where are you? Not because God didn't know, but he wanted to give him a chance to, first of all, where are you? Like, where are you holding? Ayaka. This is a question that God asks us every day. Ayaka, where are you? Where are you standing? Where are you in your divine service and in your mission in the world? But God also wanted to give Adam a chance to explain, to speak up for himself, which he did. He said, I heard your voice in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked. So I hid, which means clearly all of a sudden, I'm not ashamed and I am ashamed. What happened in between? So God said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree from which I commanded you not to eat? Now, of course, God knew they ate. This whole thing was a setup, so to speak. It's what God wanted them to do anyways. But he's saying, one second, now you're naked and you're hiding. So it's really it's so interesting that the story of the tree of knowledge is bracketed by references to Adam and Chava in their states of undress and what that felt like to them and what that meant to them, how they experienced it pre-eating from the tree, post-eating from the tree, totally different. Because pre-eating from the tree, their bodies were just divine.
And that's why God is asking, where are you? Where are you now? Like,
Yes.
He wanted to
Yes.
hear what,
Yes.
it's not where are you
Like we now,
hiding, like over here
exactly.
in the corner over
Almost
there.
a curiosity.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so we see pre-tree of knowledge, right? This whole episode created the complexity of modesty and sexuality that we have in today's world, right? All of a sudden he's like, I'm self-conscious, I'm naked, I'm hiding, right? Like everything really changed from that one act that they did of eating from the tree. So really essentially what it was a rupture. They created a rupture in their relationship with God. So I think instead of the sin, I like to call it the rupture. It was the rupture in the Garden of Eden. There was God and Adam and Chava, they were even though they were creations, they were just everything was godly. Everything they did was godly. There was no self-consciousness. There was no ability to free will to make a bad choice or a wrong choice, so to speak, except when the snake comes along, right? And he had to come along because they didn't have it inside of them to do it themselves. When Chava said, the snake told me to do it, she was right. She wasn't just deferring blame. She was saying if not for the snake, I could have never made this choice. I only had good inside of me. I only had the ability to do the right thing. The snake is like metaphor, but not, like it's the evil inclination. It's like that God created the world so that we can have free choice, so that we, right? So she wasn't deferring blame. She was like, yeah, look at this thing, this snake. That's what it, yeah.
I also want to point out that it was probably easier for her to eat from the fruit because she was never actually directly told by God.
Yes.
not to eat it.
I read that also.
Yeah, she was created after.
Right. I was thinking about it. I'm like, the command actually was to Adam,
Yeah.
and he must have given it over to Chava. He
Yeah.
probably, he didn't do a very good job giving it over. He lost the message in the present.
Yeah.
No, but really, so even that, look at that. She wasn't even told directly by God. She was told by her husband, and she intuited what should really happen.
And the servant sort of like is really her thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, in the
I
story, he was
think-
an actual being,
Right.
right? That was then relegated to a snake. But yeah, what that means for us is, again, yes, it's like let me get into you and get you to do it. But she chose it. She did. She's like, because at the same time, we're like, wait, but if she was fully divine, and then there's a snake talking, right? It was like the introduction of now free will and the fact that we have both positive and negative voices inside of us. But Chava chose it willingly, knowing what she was doing, knowing that she was actually fulfilling God's real desire for the world.
So God told Adam, don't partake of the tree of knowledge, even before
Chava
Chava
was-
or Eve was even a being.
Yes.
So obviously, she wasn't told directly. She must have obviously she heard it. Adam must have told her, but that's not in there. It's so cool that what's not in it. I mean, it's interesting that when I was raised, like, where is it written? You know, when you do something, and it's always interesting how we know what's in the Torah,
Mhm.
and then we like, where is it written? Then you go look, it's not in there. It's not in there. It doesn't say apple. And if it
Right.
did, it would. I mean, it's always interesting how what isn't in there, we wonder about it. But I love that. Where's it written? And you look, oh, it's not there.
Yeah, exactly. It's really fascinating. So that's what I'm saying. We hear these stories, and then I don't know, that's just what sticks. However, we learned it maybe in second grade Hebrew school or whatever it is, but really there's so much deeper. And then there's also so many myths that kind of come along with when we don't keep delving into Torah and keep really understanding it.
We
Yeah.
always hear that God told Adam and Eve. We never say God told Adam. I mean,
Right.
Yeah, we always hear that God told Adam and Eve not to eat that.
Right. Because it was still a command for both of them.
But it doesn't
But it
say
wasn't.
here that he just, does it say here that he just told Adam? Or
Well, he told Adam, the command where he said, don't eat from it, is before Chava was created.
Oh.
Because if
okay.
you look, then it says right after that, after verse 17, right, where he says, don't eat from it. Then he says, oh, you shouldn't be alone. You should have a, right? So the command came before. It did apply to both of them.
Right.
But yeah, it is interesting that it was told to Adam,
Right.
who told it to Chava. Chava ate from the tree, who gave it to Adam, right?
Right.
But it's really like this whole setup for exactly how the
Who
God.
even knows if Adam told Chava, right?
Or how specifically he told her.
Right.
It's not in there.
Right,
Right.
We really don't
Right.
know what she
Right.
is.
right.
Right.
And she told the snake,
Told her.
oh, we can't touch it.
Right, so he
So
could tell me.
it's a really bad job in communication.
Oh, okay.
Uh, okay, so again, pre eating from the tree, post eating from the tree, and the difference, right? Pre eating from the tree, human intelligence really functioned in black and white, right? Humans can differentiate, Adam and Chava could differentiate between objective truth and falsehood from a state of emotional distance. Then post, like everything was just objective, right? But then post eating from the tree, the tree was the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, the tree of knowledge of good and bad. Okay, so actually, Chabad is an acronym for Chachma, Bina, and Das, which are three cognitive functions, three levels of our three intellectual states, right? In English, we translate it as wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Now, in English, that just sounds like, okay, understanding, I get it, and whatever. It sounds like the same thing. But actually, it's actually very different. So Chachma is kind of like that first flash of an idea. That first, like when you just, it's like, it's like if you just have a first flash of an idea, it's like a dot. It's like an idea that's not fleshed out. It's not integrated. It's not understood. It's just like burst of inspiration almost. And then Bina is when you start hashing out the details. It's like a dot that gets expanded. And then Da'at, that last one, is when you like really understand it, you really know it to the point where you actually like apply it, let's say, right? So it's maybe like taking an idea, brainstorming about it, and then putting it into action almost to the point where you're ready to put it into action. It might be like a way so in other words, this was the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge. Now, Das, it's the last one. It's like the one where you are like that, where it created complete self-awareness. That's really what it was. It was like Das, where it changed their understanding of the world in an integrated way, like in a very down to earth kind of way, right? Where now it's mixed together, things aren't so black and white. You can assign your own subjective, reasonings to things, all of that. It really changed everything. As now you can think of yourself as distinct and apart from God, right? Das, you're like your own self-awareness now, not just fully connected with God, but I have my own. So what happened afterwards? They felt shame in their nakedness, right? Shame is the emotion that comes up when there's a discrepancy with who you are and who you think you ought to be, who you should be, right? And so now all of a sudden they're feeling shame. And now there's this possibility in the world, like I said, for all the negativity, the misalignments, the things that are so holy to be abused, food and intimacy and physical pleasures and just the world around us. And it also has the potential for something so much greater, so much higher. So them being expelled from the garden seemed like, oh, that again, God angry, I'm going to expel you from the garden, you're demoted, right? But really what God is saying is, now you have a choice. From now on, you will operate outside of the safe zone. I am graduating you to the sphere where your actions make a difference. You're not in the Garden of Eden anymore, where it's all godliness. Now you're in the world to do exactly what the whole point was. I wanted a low world. I wanted, back to that quote in the Zohar, God wanted a home in the lower worlds. He's like, good, leave the garden, done with that. That's not even what I wanted anyways. You chose it, good. Now the world can begin. Now existence can continue.
So our purpose is to make this low world holy. Okay.
100%. If I would say it in one line, that's what it would be.
Can you repeat that line, Adina, please?
Which one? Oh, the line that Sarah just said?
Yes.
Okay, Sarah, repeat.
That the purpose of life is to make this world holy.
The purpose of life is to make this world holy. Our reason for existence, our life's mission is to make this physical world a holy place, which makes it a home for God. When we do that, which will make it a world of Mashiach. That's when Mashiach can come, when this place is a place where God's like, oh, I'm at home. I always say, like, when I describe it to like bat mitzvah girls that I'm studying with or whatever it is, like, I always ask them, like, what makes your room your room? What makes you like the coziest in your room? Now these like big comfies they have like these big warm sweaters, your cozy slippers, your favorite pillow, right? Every time we do a mitzvah, that is what we're doing. We're giving God a pair of cozy slippers. He's like, oh, okay, I can feel comfortable here. Okay, you just gave some charity. Oh, okay. Like every physical object.
Oh, sweetheart.
Hi, Hannah. Thanks, Lindsay. Okay, every time I take some water and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a blessing on this. I'll do it right now. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. Right, and I use the energy from my water to teach Torah. It's like every single physical object, this table. I mean, a lot of these things have been elevated, but we're going to continue to elevate them. And we're like, I've said this in other classes, right? Like my kids and I will go on like a new trail. We'll go hiking. We'll be on like a new trail path. And we're like, I bet no one ever said words of Torah on this path. And we'll say some verses of Torah because that's what it means. Like every single physical area. Imagine and that was the Rebbe's vision of sending Chabad all over the world, right? Go to every corner and create Jewish communities and even the prisons, and create and do mitzvahs and find other people that are going to do mitzvahs and put tefillin on someone and put a mezuzah on someone's home. Like, let's take this entire physical world and get it back to even higher than the Garden of Eden, right? The times of Mashiach. But let's take this physical world and make it a spiritual place, And we can do that. That's why physical and spiritual in Judaism is so connected. It's not like go off into the mountaintops and meditate. We don't do speaking fasts. We don't know, use our words for good. Stay right here in the physical world and elevate it and do mitzvahs with it and find opportunities to do a good deed, to help somebody, to light your Shabbat candles, whatever it is, right? All the mitzvah.
He gave them choice.
With free choice, because God's not like, I want you to choose it. Things are so much, like, yeah, I could tell my kids what to do. And if they do it, I'm very happy because I listened to what I said. Right. But it's also so different than when you like come home and there's like a big surprise and they all clean something. That happens. But you know what I'm saying? Like when they choose it, when it comes from them. I mean, Hadassah's like in this amazing stage and she's like, Mom, how can I help you? How can I help you? What do you need help with? I'm like,
Wow.
all the time. That's like, to me, I'm like, oh, wow. Right.
She's always been so amazing. Huh?
She is. She's really
But
amazing.
another thing is, if there's gonna be a human race, right, and
She's like
not
another
just two
mother.
people,
Mhm.
God can't
like
take
another
care
mother.
of like all
She's
these
amazing.
people.
Why not?
She really,
You know,
she's
No.
She always
No.
has been.
Why not? God?
Well, the people have to be,
Oh my
they
God,
have,
yes.
I don't know, don't people have to be responsible for making their own good decisions and?
But not because God
going out
can't be
planting
responsible.
with
I mean,
that
God is
harvest and
like,
everything? Okay.
all powerful, able to do
Okay.
anything, but he doesn't want that.
Okay,
God
Okay.
wants people to make their own choices.
okay. Well, then that kind of gets into a whole nother question about like, if God is so all powerful, how can he let certain things happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm reading another, I'm like in the middle of probably like 10 books, but I'm reading another great book that's called Why
time
God,
to
Why? What?
You have time to read.
No, that's why I'm in the middle of 10 books. Why God, Why? And it's like how to believe in heaven when it hurts like hell. It's a really good book. Yeah, that really addresses that because these things don't happen outside of God. Nothing can happen outside of God. It's not like God couldn't stop it from happening. It's not powerful enough. There's like evil, because I would say that evil is more powerful force than God. God actually created evil. That's what, right? That's what we see from this story. You have to look at the time because I'm gonna have to have a physical therapy appointment. But anyway, so this is what I wanted to. I'm doing physical therapy now. This is really the message I really want to kind of like start off with that. So number one, yes, we debunked the myth that there's no apple.
Wow.
And number two, I think we turned the story on its head from the way some of you might have viewed it until now. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Like I wouldn't even describe it as like Adam and Eve sinned and they didn't listen to God and they did it wrong and God was mad and then he punished them. I mean, what is that? And what does that have to do with us? No, this is our mission. This is like how God wanted the world to be and our entire mission statement laid out in this story so that we know what our job is now. Thank you, Chava. Not for the pregnancy and childbirth. That one I could have done without, but okay. When
But
Mashiach
maybe
comes-
also that men are innately poor communicators.
Maybe that, yes. And I could definitely rely on you, Andrea, to come up with that as the lesson of the story. If you're wondering why your spouse is not communicating well, you can blame Adam.
I think everything's just obvious.
Yeah.
Is there an amount of time that they were in the garden of godliness? And how long it took them to, or was it the first day they went?
Yes, it was within the first couple hours. So that's the other thing. It's like, seriously, God created them, told them not to do something, and they couldn't keep it for the first few hours? Like within a few hours? Like, really? But no, it's because Chava was choosing this. She's like, this isn't the world God really wanted. Let's get our mission going. Let's get on with it. Yeah.
So I remember reading somewhere that, this is also a very much a parent-child relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of this idea that it's not good for man to be alone. He needs to leave his parents, he needs to go out into the world with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
There's some themes of that in here as well. And it's almost, it's easy to read it as God being very angry, but at the same time, he gives them clothing.
Yeah.
After they leave, he clothes them and then sends them out into the world. It's
Right.
almost like, it's his blessing almost.
Yeah. If we took off the lens of God is angry and therefore is doing this, and we just put on for fun's sake that God is loving and compassionate, let's just say, you can look at it differently, right? You can see God doesn't say he knows where they are. He says, where are you? Because he wants to give them a chance to own up to it. But it's not even own up to it, to say, yeah, we chose this, right? Yes, we chose this world. And then he says, and then he says, oh, did you eat from the tree? What is he saying? Why are you feeling, ashamed? He's asking questions. And then it's not even it's like, okay, now is the effect of all the things. In other words, it's not like now here's your punishment. It's here is the effect of you eating the tree that I always wanted you to eat from, that I always wanted these things to happen because I always wanted to have a world that was actually like this. Right. And then God gives them clothing and says, okay, I'm going to out from Gan Eden. We're done with the Garden of Eden. I'm going to give you clothing. Go on your way. Continue. Right. You could look at this as just literally the natural progression of God created a world, had a plan for the world. This was just in line with that plan, chosen from Chava, who intuited exactly how it was supposed to go. So she got the ball rolling and then it continued on that way.
It's interesting when they say your childbirth is going to be painful. Well, for me, like I had for children, so yes, it's painful, but it's not. I mean, I would have never, if it was that painful, or I wouldn't have had more than one. We forget, right?
I was going to say, I think it's amnesia.
Or like you said, it's going to be harder to grow your food or garden or.
Well, the result of the pain is something
Worthwhile. And it is sort of short. That part is short-lived.
interesting, very interesting.
Yes. Okay. I don't have to rush out today. I just have an appointment. So I do have to end here. You're all welcome to stay. I'm not kicking anyone out. Okay. Angie, I'm going to stop this recording.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.